You've experienced this. You worked harder than someone else, put in more time, did everything right. And still, they got the opportunity, they got the recognition, they got ahead. And you told yourself, that's not fair. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It was never supposed to be fair. From a young age, you're taught a simple idea. Work hard. Do the right thing. Play by the rules. And things will work out. You start to believe there's a system keeping score. That effort leads to reward. That fairness balances outcomes. But then, reality starts to break that belief. You see people succeed with less effort. You see decisions that don't make sense. You see outcomes that don't match the input. And instead of questioning the system, you question yourself. Maybe I'm not good enough. But the problem isn't your effort. The problem is the assumption. You assumed fairness was part of the system. Think about where the idea of fairness comes from. School. You do the work, you get the grade. Follow the rules, you get rewarded. Break them, you get punished. It feels structured, predictable, fair. But that environment is controlled. It's designed to create the illusion of fairness, because in the real world, there is no system balancing effort and reward. Let's make it real. You and a colleague work on the same project. You stay late. You fix problems. You carry the workload. They do less. But when it's time for recognition, they're the one praised. Why? Not because they worked harder, but because they were more visible, better connected, closer to the decision maker. And that's when it hits you. Effort wasn't the deciding factor. Now here's where most people go wrong. They react emotionally. This isn't fair. This shouldn't happen. But that reaction is based on a belief that fairness is supposed to exist. It's not. Fairness is not a rule. It's an expectation you were taught, and expectations create frustration when reality doesn't follow them. You weren't treated unfairly. You were operating under the wrong assumption. Let's go deeper into this. Because this is where frustration turns into confusion. You've probably had a moment like this. You give something your full effort. You prepare. You stay consistent. You push harder than everyone else. And in your mind, there's an expectation forming. This should pay off. Not because you said it out loud, but because you believe effort means something. Now, fast forward. The result comes in, and it doesn't match the effort. Someone else gets the opportunity. Someone else gets recognized. Someone else moves forward. And you don't. That moment hits hard. Because it doesn't just feel disappointing. It feels wrong. Unjust. Like something was taken from you. But here's the part most people avoid. Nothing was taken from you. Because nothing was guaranteed. Effort feels valuable because it's difficult. It costs you time, energy, focus. So your mind tries to assign it value. It tells you, if I invest this much, I should get something back. But reality doesn't operate like a transaction. There's no system keeping score. No invisible force making sure effort equals reward. Let's make this even clearer. Two people apply for the same position. One has worked harder for years. The other understands how to position themselves better. They communicate better. They build relationships. They know how to be seen. And when the decision is made, the second person wins. Now, from the outside, it looks unfair. But from the perspective of the decision maker, it makes sense. Because decisions are not made based on effort alone. They're made based on visibility, perceived value, confidence, trust, influence. Effort is just one variable, and often not the deciding one. This is the disconnect. You measure yourself by how hard you work. Others measure you by what they see and what you produce. And when those two don't align, you feel overlooked. But the system didn't fail. Your expectation did. And this is where it becomes dangerous. Because, if you keep believing that effort guarantees reward, you will keep repeating the same cycle. Work harder. Expect more. Feel disappointed. Over and over again. Until frustration turns into resentment. And resentment keeps you stuck. Because you're still playing by a rule that doesn't exist. This is the shift you have to make. Effort matters, but it doesn't decide outcomes. Outcomes are shaped by leverage, by positioning, by perception, by influence. And until you factor those in, effort alone will continue to feel unrewarded. If effort doesn't decide outcomes, then what does? Power. Not always obvious power. Not always loud or visible, but influence, control, position. Let's make this real. A decision is being made. Who gets promoted? Who gets the opportunity? Whose idea moves forward? You assume it will be based on merit, effort, skill, performance. But that's not what actually happens. The decision is shaped by who is trusted, who is known, who is aligned with the decision maker, who has influence in the room. And most of this happens before the decision is even made. That's the part people miss. By the time outcomes are announced, they were already decided. Not publicly, but structurally. Through relationships. Through perception. Through positioning. Here's a simple example. Two people present the same idea. One is known, respected, and trusted. The other is new, less visible, less connected. Same idea. Different outcome. Why? Because people don't just evaluate ideas. They evaluate the person behind the idea. This is power in action. It doesn't always look like authority. Sometimes it looks like familiarity. Sometimes like confidence. Sometimes like proximity to the right people. But it shapes outcomes consistently. This is why fairness feels broken. Because you're looking at the surface, the visible action, while decisions are being made beneath it. And once you understand this, your question changes. Not, why is this unfair? But, who had the influence in this situation? That question gives you clarity. Because it removes emotion. And replaces it with awareness. Now, here's the uncomfortable part. If you ignore power, you stay confused. You keep expecting outcomes to match effort. And when they don't, you feel stuck. But when you recognize that power shapes outcomes, you start to see the system clearly. And once you see it clearly, you can start operating differently. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The idea of fairness doesn't just exist by accident. It's reinforced, repeated, encouraged. Because it keeps people predictable. Think about the messages you've heard your whole life. Work hard. Be patient. Follow the rules. And eventually, you'll be rewarded. It sounds reasonable. It sounds fair. But look at what it does. It keeps you focused on effort. It keeps you waiting. It keeps you compliant. Because if you believe the system is fair, you don't question it. You don't challenge outcomes. You don't analyze power. You don't reposition yourself. You just keep doing more of the same, hoping the result will change. Let's make this real again. You stay loyal to a job for years. You take on extra work. You prove your reliability. And you expect that loyalty to be recognized. But when an opportunity comes, it goes to someone else, someone newer, more visible, better connected. And instead of stepping back and asking what actually happened, you tell yourself, I just need to work harder. That's the trap. Because the belief in fairness redirects your focus away from strategy and back into effort. Over and over again. This is why the idea is so powerful. Not because it's true, but because it's useful. It keeps systems stable. It keeps people in line. It reduces resistance. And most importantly, it delays awareness. Because the moment you stop believing things are fair, you start asking better questions. You stop waiting. You stop assuming. You start observing. You start adapting. And that changes how you operate completely. This is not about becoming cynical. It's about becoming accurate. Because once you understand that fairness is not guaranteed, you stop relying on it. And when you stop relying on it, you stop being controlled by it. Letting go of fairness sounds simple. It's not. Because it's not just an idea. It's something you've built your expectations around. You expect effort to be rewarded. You expect consistency to be noticed. You expect the system to recognize what you put in. And when that doesn't happen, you feel wronged, stuck, sometimes even bitter. But here's the shift you have to make. Fairness is not something you can rely on. And as long as you do, it will keep disappointing you. Because every time an outcome doesn't match your expectation, you go back to the same thought. This shouldn't be happening. But it is happening. And that's the point. Reality doesn't adjust to your expectation of fairness. You have to adjust to reality. And this is where most people hesitate. Because letting go of fairness feels like giving something up. Like accepting less. Like lowering your standards. But it's the opposite. You're not lowering your standards. You're upgrading your awareness. You're moving from expectation to observation. From assumption to understanding. Let's make this practical. Instead of asking, is this fair? You start asking, what actually led to this outcome? Who had influence here? What factors mattered most? What did I overlook? These questions don't feel as comfortable, but they give you control. Because now you're not reacting emotionally, you're analyzing strategically. This is where growth actually happens. Because once you stop expecting fairness, you stop waiting for things to balance out. You stop hoping the system will correct itself. And you start positioning yourself differently. And you become more aware of visibility, relationships, timing, perception. The things that actually shape outcomes. And here's the most important part. You stop taking outcomes personally. Because it's no longer about, why wasn't I treated fairly? It becomes, what influenced this result? That shift removes frustration and replaces it with clarity. And clarity is what allows you to move forward. Not stuck in expectation, but operating in reality. Once you stop expecting fairness, everything changes. Not emotionally, strategically. Because now you're no longer asking, is this fair? You're asking, how does this actually work? That question shifts your entire approach. You stop focusing only on effort and start focusing on leverage. You begin to notice things you ignored before. Who gets seen? Who gets heard? Who gets remembered? And more importantly, why? Let's make this practical. Instead of just working harder, you make your work visible. Instead of waiting to be recognized, you position yourself where recognition happens. Instead of assuming decisions are objective, you understand the people behind them. Because outcomes don't just happen. They are shaped. This is where you start thinking differently. You ask, how is this perceived? Who influences this decision? What matters in this environment? Where should I position myself? These are strategic questions, and they give you something fairness never could. Control. Not over everything, but over how you operate within it. Now here's the key balance. This is not about becoming manipulative. It's not about abandoning effort. Effort still matters. Skill still matters. Discipline still matters. But on their own, they are not enough. Effort gets you in the game. Positioning determines how far you go. And once you understand that, you stop relying on hope. You stop expecting outcomes to balance out. You start shaping them. This is how people move ahead in environments that feel unfair. Not by complaining, not by waiting, but by understanding the system and adjusting to it. Because the system doesn't change for you. You learn how to operate within it. Fairness feels right. It feels like something that should exist. But in reality, it's not what drives outcomes. This is the truth most people avoid, not because it's complicated, but because it's uncomfortable. Thinkers like Niccolò Machiavelli hinted at this in The Prince. That power, perception, and positioning shape results far more than ideals like fairness. And once you see that, you stop expecting the system to be balanced. You start learning how it actually works. Because in the end, fairness doesn't decide outcomes. Understanding the system does. If you want to go deeper into how power actually works, subscribe to The Lonely Pen. Because this series isn't about what sounds right. It's about what's real.